She said I was reliable and sweet, but physically, nothing special compared to other men, and I realized being someone's consolation prize wasn't the life I wanted. Sometimes the most devastating truths come from conversations you weren't supposed to hear, and sometimes that's exactly what you need to finally see clearly. I was 31 when I met Vanessa, working as a warehouse operations supervisor for an automotive parts distributor in Detroit. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was solid, managing inventory systems, coordinating shipments, making sure everything ran smoothly in our corner of the industrial world. I lived in a modest duplex on the east side, drove a reliable Honda that I'd bought used 3 years earlier, and had built up a decent emergency fund through careful budgeting and consistent work habits. I wasn't wealthy, but I was stable, which seemed more valuable than flashy in a city where a lot of people struggled to find steady employment. My days followed predictable rhythms: up at 6, gym routine 3 times a week, work from 7 to 4, evenings spent reading or catching up on crime documentaries that I'd become oddly fascinated with over the years. It wasn't an exciting existence, but it was mine, and I'd worked hard to build something dependable after growing up watching my parents struggle with inconsistent jobs and financial stress. I valued routine, planning ahead, and the quiet satisfaction that came from doing good work without needing constant recognition or drama. Vanessa started working in customer service at our industrial complex during the summer of 2023, handling client inquiries and processing orders in the building next to our main warehouse facility. I first noticed her during lunch breaks in the shared break room, where she'd sit with her laptop, usually muttering creative complaints about our outdated computer systems while trying to navigate the ancient software we all had to use. She had this sharp, dry sense of humor that cut through the usual workplace small talk, making observations about inefficient processes and ridiculous corporate policies that were both accurate and genuinely funny. I found myself timing my lunch breaks to coincide with hers, not because I was actively pursuing anything romantic, but because listening to her commentary made those 30-minute breaks more entertaining than scrolling through my phone alone. She was 26, had moved to Detroit from Grand Rapids for the job, and seemed to approach everything with this practical intelligence that I appreciated. Unlike some of the younger employees who complained constantly without offering solutions, Vanessa would identify problems and then figure out workarounds, often helping other people navigate the same systems that frustrated her. What surprised me most was when she directly asked me out after about 6 weeks of these casual lunch conversations. I was updating inventory counts on my tablet when she approached my table and said she'd been thinking we should try dinner somewhere that wasn't the break room, maybe catch a movie afterward if I was interested. Her approach was straightforward and confident without being aggressive, which I found refreshing after years of trying to decode mixed signals from other women who seemed to expect elaborate romantic gestures or complex courtship rituals. We went to a local Italian place the following Saturday, and the conversation flowed naturally from workplace observations to personal interests, travel experiences, and family backgrounds. She seemed genuinely impressed by my stability and financial responsibility, mentioning how refreshing it was to meet someone who had their life together without being obsessed with status symbols or constantly chasing the next big thing. I appreciated her directness and intelligence, the way she could make me laugh without resorting to mean-spirited humor about other people. Our early months together felt effortless in ways I hadn't experienced in previous relationships. Vanessa would come over to my duplex after work, and we'd cook simple dinners together while discussing our days, often settling in for board game sessions that became surprisingly competitive or binge-watching true crime series that we both found fascinating. She seemed to genuinely enjoy these quiet evenings, commenting that she felt more relaxed at my place than anywhere else, that there was something comforting about the predictable routine and lack of pressure to be constantly entertaining or impressive. We'd take weekend drives to explore small towns outside Detroit, visit farmers markets, or spend Sunday afternoons at local museums that neither of us had bothered visiting despite living in the area for years. I found her curiosity engaging. She'd ask thoughtful questions about logistics and supply chain management, showing real interest in understanding the complexities of work that most people found boring. She'd share stories about difficult customers and the ridiculous situations that arose in customer service, but always with this analytical perspective that focused on solving problems rather than just venting frustrations. The physical attraction felt natural and comfortable rather than overwhelming or dramatic. We'd hold hands while walking, she'd curl up against me during movies, and everything progressed at a pace that felt right for both of us without awkward negotiations or uncertainty about boundaries. She'd compliment my reliability and steadiness, saying she'd never dated anyone who made her feel so secure and valued. I thought I'd found someone who appreciated the same things I did: consistency, honesty, building something real together instead of chasing excitement or validation from others. Looking back, those first 6 months represented everything I thought I wanted in a relationship: genuine compatibility, shared values, and the kind of easy companionship that suggested we could build something lasting together without constant drama or uncertainty about where we stood. Around month 7, something shifted in ways that were subtle at first but became increasingly impossible to ignore. Vanessa started spending significant time on social media, particularly following fitness influencers who posted workout videos and motivational content about optimization and self-improvement. She'd scroll through Instagram during our evening downtime, showing me posts from trainers and lifestyle coaches with impressively sculpted physiques, making comments about their dedication and discipline. Initially, I thought it was just casual interest in fitness, maybe inspiration to get more active, but her focus became increasingly intense and specific. She'd point out particularly attractive men we'd encounter in daily life: the UPS driver with broad shoulders, the barista at our coffee shop who had visible arm muscles, guys at the grocery store who looked like they spent serious time in the gym. These observations started as seemingly innocent comments but gradually took on a more pointed quality, as if she was cataloging examples of what physical attractiveness actually looked like. The shift became more pronounced when Vanessa joined CrossFit Detroit, an expensive gym across town that specialized in high-intensity group workouts and competitive fitness training. The membership cost more than twice what my basic gym charged, but she insisted it was worth the investment for the community aspect and professional coaching. She started attending classes 4 times a week, coming home energized and full of stories about the challenging workouts and supportive environment. Most frequently, she talked about Marcus, her trainer, describing his impressive physique, his knowledge of nutrition and optimization techniques, and his ability to push people beyond their perceived limitations. She'd mention how Marcus could deadlift nearly 400 pounds, how he'd competed in regional fitness competitions, how he maintained single-digit body fat percentage through careful diet and training protocols. I initially appreciated her enthusiasm for fitness, thinking it was healthy for her to have interests and goals outside our relationship. However, Vanessa began making suggestions about changes I could make to improve my own appearance and lifestyle habits. She'd recommend workout routines she'd learned at CrossFit, suggesting I should try incorporating more functional movements and high-intensity training into my basic gym routine. She criticized my practical buzz cut, saying I should grow my hair out to give myself more styling options and a softer, more contemporary look. My wardrobe became another target for constructive feedback. She'd suggest replacing my comfortable work clothes and casual weekend attire with trendy athleisure pieces, fitted shirts that would show off whatever muscle definition I might develop, and accessories that would make me look more put together and intentional about my appearance. These suggestions were always framed as helpful advice from someone who cared about me, but the frequency and specificity made it clear that she was increasingly dissatisfied with how I looked and presented myself to the world. The most telling change was how Vanessa approached social media and self-presentation. She started taking multiple selfies before posting anything, adjusting lighting and angles to optimize her appearance, writing captions that seemed designed to attract maximum attention and engagement. She'd check her phone constantly to monitor likes and comments on her posts, expressing frustration when photos didn't perform as well as she'd hoped or when other women in her social circle received more positive responses. She began following fitness and lifestyle accounts obsessively, comparing herself to influencers and expressing dissatisfaction with various aspects of her own life and appearance. Our quiet evenings at home became less frequent as she prioritized gym sessions, social events with her CrossFit community, and what seemed like an endless quest for validation through social media platforms that rewarded attractive, aspirational content over authentic personal connections. The moment that shattered my perception of our relationship happened at a housewarming party for one of Vanessa's coworkers in early March, held in a trendy loft downtown that represented everything I wasn't particularly interested in but attended because supporting her social connections seemed important. The space was all exposed brick and industrial fixtures, filled with young professionals drinking craft cocktails and discussing fitness routines, career advancement strategies, and social media optimization techniques. I spent most of the evening making polite conversation with people I didn't know while Vanessa networked enthusiastically, clearly in her element among coworkers who shared her interests in appearance, lifestyle branding, and competitive self-improvement. I was genuinely happy to see her enjoying herself, even though the environment wasn't my preference, and I'd been looking forward to a quiet evening together afterward where she could tell me about the interesting conversations she'd had with people from her work. During the party, I went to the kitchen to refill our drinks and grab some of the appetizers that were laid out on expensive-looking serving platters, taking my time to avoid interrupting the animated conversation Vanessa was having with a group of her female colleagues near the living room windows. From the kitchen, I could hear their voices clearly but remained out of sight, initially not paying attention to their discussion until I heard my own name mentioned in a context that made me freeze completely. Vanessa was telling her friends that Nathan was reliable and sweet, someone who made her feel secure and valued, but she went on to explain that physically he was nothing special compared to men like Marcus from her gym. She described me as acceptable but not exciting, someone whose appearance was merely adequate rather than impressive or desirable. The conversation continued with her expressing frustration that her friends seemed to date these gorgeous, physically impressive guys while she was settling for someone whose best qualities were stability and dependability rather than the kind of attraction that made other women envious. What made the conversation even more devastating was the specific way Vanessa described her internal conflict about our relationship. She told her friends that she sometimes wondered if she was settling, if she could find someone who combined my reliability and financial stability with the physical attractiveness and excitement she saw in men like Marcus. She mentioned that being with me felt safe and comfortable, but that safety wasn't the same as genuine attraction or the kind of passion she saw in other people's relationships. Her friends offered various perspectives, some suggesting that stability was more important than superficial attraction, others encouraging her to pursue what she really wanted rather than compromising her desires for the sake of security. Vanessa responded by saying she felt torn between practical considerations and her actual preferences, acknowledging that I treated her well but admitting that she fantasized about being with someone who looked like Marcus and made her feel genuinely excited rather than merely content. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but each detail felt like a physical blow to everything I thought I understood about our relationship and how she saw me. I heard her describe our intimate moments as pleasant but not particularly exciting, our future plans as sensible but not inspiring, and my overall presence in her life as valuable from a practical standpoint but lacking in the qualities that created genuine desire and enthusiasm. She mentioned that her social media followers had started commenting on couples' photos, asking if I was her brother or a friend rather than her boyfriend, which apparently bothered her more than she'd ever let on to me. The most painful part was hearing her laugh with genuine amusement when one friend suggested she could keep me around for stability while exploring her options with more attractive men, as if the idea of treating our relationship as a backup plan while pursuing other interests was both reasonable and potentially entertaining. I stood in that kitchen for several more minutes after their conversation moved to other topics, processing the complete disconnect between what I thought we had and how she actually perceived our relationship. Everything suddenly made sense: the constant suggestions for improvement, the detailed descriptions of Marcus and other attractive men, the increased focus on social media validation, and the subtle but persistent dissatisfaction that had been growing for months. I wasn't her boyfriend in any meaningful sense. I was her consolation prize, her safety net, her acceptable option while she figured out how to attract someone who actually excited her. Rather than confront anyone or create a scene that would embarrass both of us in front of her colleagues, I quietly left the party without saying goodbye, driving home through empty downtown streets while trying to understand how I'd missed such obvious signs that she saw me as fundamentally inadequate despite all her reassurances about appreciating my qualities and feeling secure in our relationship. The next morning, I woke up with complete clarity about what needed to happen, feeling calmer than I'd expected after such a devastating revelation. I spent the early hours organizing my thoughts and preparing for a conversation that would end our relationship cleanly, without accusations or attempts to change her mind about something she'd obviously been feeling for months. When Vanessa came over that afternoon, clearly hungover and apologetic about my sudden departure from the party, I told her simply that I thought we wanted different things and our relationship had run its course. She looked genuinely surprised by my directness, asking what I meant and where this sudden decision was coming from, clearly expecting our usual pattern of quiet evenings and comfortable routine to continue indefinitely. I explained that I'd been thinking about our compatibility and realized we had fundamentally different expectations about relationships, attraction, and what we wanted from a partner, keeping my tone matter-of-fact rather than emotional or accusatory. When Vanessa pressed for specifics about what had changed or what she'd done wrong, I calmly told her that I'd overheard her conversation with her friends at the party, including her comments about settling, wishing she could find someone with my stability but Marcus's physical attractiveness, and her description of me as nothing special compared to other men. Her face went through several expressions: panic, embarrassment, anger, then back to panic as she realized the implications of what I'd heard. She immediately tried to dismiss her comments as meaningless gossip, claiming that she'd been drinking and venting frustrations that didn't represent her real feelings, insisting that women often said things in groups that they didn't actually mean. I listened patiently to her explanations before telling her that regardless of the context or her intentions, I now understood exactly how she saw me and our relationship, and I wasn't interested in being someone's backup plan or consolation prize while they figured out how to attract their actual preference. Vanessa's attempts to salvage the situation became increasingly desperate and revealing as she cycled through various strategies to convince me I was overreacting or misunderstanding her true feelings. She cried genuine tears while promising that she'd been confused and stupid, that she really did love me and appreciate everything I brought to our relationship, that her comments had been influenced by peer pressure and social media comparisons that didn't reflect her authentic desires. She offered to quit CrossFit, stop following fitness influencers, delete her social media accounts, and focus entirely on building our relationship without outside influences or superficial distractions. When those promises didn't move me, she tried anger, accusing me of being insecure and unable to handle honest conversations between friends, suggesting that my reaction proved I wasn't confident enough to be with someone like her anyway. Finally, she attempted seduction, moving closer and touching my arm while suggesting we could work through this misunderstanding if I really cared about what we'd built together over the past 8 months. I remained calm throughout her emotional appeals, explaining that once someone explicitly states they're settling for you while wishing they could attract someone better, the relationship is fundamentally damaged beyond repair. I told her that I didn't blame her for having preferences or finding other men more attractive, but I also wasn't going to pretend that knowledge didn't change how I saw our entire dynamic and future prospects. She kept insisting that all couples dealt with attraction to other people and that her honesty with friends should be seen as normal rather than relationship ending, but I pointed out that there was a significant difference between acknowledging attractive people exist and describing your current partner as merely acceptable while fantasizing about upgrading to someone better. When she asked what she could do to fix things, I explained that the problem wasn't her behavior going forward but rather the fundamental mismatch between what she actually wanted and what I could realistically provide, which meant we were both wasting time trying to force something that wasn't genuinely satisfying for either of us. The conversation ended with me helping her collect her belongings from my duplex while she alternated between tears and arguments about my unwillingness to fight for our relationship. I wished her well sincerely, telling her that I hoped she found someone who excited her the way she deserved to be excited, but that person wasn't me and we both needed to accept that reality rather than prolonging an arrangement that left her feeling like she was settling. She left angry and hurt, probably expecting me to reconsider once I'd had time to calm down and realize what I was giving up, but I felt nothing except relief that I'd finally addressed the underlying dishonesty that had been poisoning our relationship for months. 2 months after the breakup, I focused entirely on work and personal interests while deliberately avoiding any information about Vanessa's situation, though occasional workplace gossip suggested she was struggling with the consequences of her choices in ways that confirmed my decision had been correct. According to mutual acquaintances, she'd attempted to pursue something with Marcus from her gym, only to discover that he was already in a committed relationship and had never shown any interest in her beyond professional trainer-client interactions. Her social media presence had apparently become increasingly desperate, with posts seeking validation that received fewer and fewer positive responses as people grew tired of her obvious attempts to attract male attention through fitness photos and inspirational quotes about knowing your worth. I avoided these updates intentionally, preferring to focus on rebuilding my routine and rediscovering interests that had taken a backseat during months of trying to accommodate someone who fundamentally didn't appreciate what I offered. My breakthrough came at a regional logistics conference in Chicago, where our company had sent me to attend presentations on supply chain optimization and emerging industry trends. I typically enjoyed these professional events for the educational content and networking opportunities, but this particular conference introduced me to someone who would completely change my perspective on relationships and what genuine attraction actually looked like. During the second day of sessions, I attended a presentation on efficiency optimization delivered by Claire Morrison, a supply chain analyst from Milwaukee who impressed the entire audience with her comprehensive understanding of complex logistics challenges and innovative solutions that several major companies had successfully implemented. Her presentation was both technically sophisticated and clearly communicated, demonstrating expertise that made even experienced professionals take notes and ask detailed follow-up questions about methodology and practical applications. What struck me most about Claire wasn't just her professional competence, but how she interacted with people during coffee breaks and networking sessions that followed her presentation. She treated everyone as intelligent equals regardless of their position or company size, engaging in substantive conversations about industry developments without any condescension or attempts to impress people with her credentials. When I introduced myself and mentioned some challenges we'd been facing with inventory management systems, she listened thoughtfully and offered practical suggestions based on similar situations she'd encountered, asking perceptive questions about our specific constraints and goals rather than providing generic advice. Her approach was collaborative rather than competitive, focused on solving actual problems rather than demonstrating her own expertise or superiority over others in the field. During our conversation, Claire casually mentioned that she found my insights about warehouse automation both practical and forward-thinking, complementing my understanding of how technological changes affected day-to-day operations in ways that many analysts overlooked when developing theoretical improvements. Her compliments felt genuine and specific rather than flattering or manipulative, based on actual observations about my knowledge and perspective rather than attempts to make me feel good for strategic purposes. When other conference attendees joined our discussion, she naturally included them while continuing to reference points I'd made, treating my contributions as valuable rather than dismissible or merely acceptable. The contrast with Vanessa's approach to my work and expertise was immediately apparent. Claire seemed genuinely interested in what I did and thought, asking questions that demonstrated respect for my experience and intelligence rather than polite tolerance for topics that bored her. What surprised me most was how Claire handled the topic of attraction and personal connection during our extended conversation over dinner that evening. After we'd covered industry topics thoroughly and moved on to more personal subjects, she mentioned matter-of-factly that she found me attractive in addition to being professionally impressive, explaining that intelligence and competence were qualities that had always appealed to her more than superficial characteristics that had nothing to do with character or compatibility. Her approach was direct without being aggressive, confident without being presumptuous, and based on genuine appreciation for qualities that actually mattered in building a meaningful relationship. She asked about my interests outside work, listened attentively to my responses about crime documentaries and weekend hiking, and shared her own hobbies related to photography and historical research with the kind of enthusiasm that made her even more attractive to me. By the end of the conference, we'd exchanged contact information and made plans to continue our conversation through phone calls and video chats, both acknowledging that the distance between Detroit and Milwaukee was manageable for weekend visits if we decided to pursue something more serious. I drove home feeling energized and optimistic in ways I hadn't experienced in months, not just because I'd met someone interesting, but because the entire interaction had reminded me what it felt like to be appreciated and valued for exactly who I was rather than seen as acceptable but inadequate compared to some idealized alternative. Claire's genuine interest in my thoughts, her obvious attraction to my actual qualities, and her straightforward communication style represented everything I'd been missing during those final months with Vanessa, when every conversation had felt like an evaluation where I consistently fell short of her evolving standards and expectations. 4 months after my breakup with Vanessa, Claire and I had developed a solid long-distance relationship built on mutual respect, genuine attraction, and the kind of easy communication that made weekend visits feel natural rather than forced or performative. She'd driven down to Detroit twice, and I'd made the trip to Milwaukee 3 times, each visit confirming that our initial connection had real potential for something lasting and meaningful. Claire consistently demonstrated the qualities that had attracted me during our first meeting: intelligence, directness, and genuine appreciation for who I was rather than disappointment about who I wasn't. We were having dinner at Roast, an upscale restaurant in downtown Detroit that I'd chosen specifically because Claire appreciated good food and I wanted to show her one of the city's better dining establishments, when Vanessa appeared with a group of friends near the bar area. I noticed her first, recognizing her laugh from across the restaurant, and immediately felt that familiar knot of tension that comes from encountering someone who represents a painful chapter of your life. Vanessa looked different, thinner than before, with an edge of desperation in her movements and expressions that suggested the past few months hadn't been kind to her. She was clearly trying too hard to appear confident and carefree, laughing too loudly at her friends' comments and checking her phone constantly in ways that reminded me of her worst social media habits during our relationship. When she spotted me sitting with Claire, her entire demeanor changed instantly, the forced cheerfulness disappeared, replaced by obvious shock and what looked like genuine distress at seeing me with someone who was obviously attractive and clearly enjoying my company. After about 10 minutes of obvious staring and whispered conversations with her friends, Vanessa approached our table with the kind of determined desperation that suggested she'd been building up courage to confront a situation she couldn't ignore. She interrupted our conversation about Claire's upcoming work projects, apologizing for the intrusion but claiming she needed to speak with me about something important that couldn't wait. Claire handled the situation with remarkable grace, introducing herself politely and suggesting she'd give us privacy if we needed to discuss something personal, but I immediately explained that anything Vanessa wanted to say could be said in front of Claire since we had no secrets or unfinished business that required private conversation. Vanessa's face showed a mixture of panic and frustration at my refusal to engage with her dramatic approach, clearly having expected me to accommodate her need for attention and emotional processing. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable and revealing conversations I'd ever experienced, as Vanessa desperately attempted to reconcile with me while simultaneously insulting Claire and demonstrating exactly why our relationship had been doomed from the beginning. She started by claiming that her previous comments about settling and wishing for someone more attractive had been completely meaningless, the result of peer pressure and social media influence rather than her genuine feelings about me and our relationship. She insisted that pursuing Marcus had been a huge mistake that taught her to appreciate what she'd had with me, explaining that he'd never been interested in her romantically and that she'd realized stability and kindness were more important than superficial attraction or social validation. Her apology sounded rehearsed and self-serving, focused on convincing me to give her another chance rather than acknowledging the genuine hurt her words and attitudes had caused. When I calmly explained that I'd moved on and was happy with Claire, Vanessa became increasingly agitated and started making comparisons that revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of healthy relationships and mutual attraction. She pointed out that Claire was obviously attractive and successful, questioning why I could date someone like her while criticizing Vanessa for noticing attractive men like Marcus, as if those situations were somehow equivalent. I explained the crucial difference. Claire genuinely found me attractive and valuable as I was, while Vanessa had spent months making it clear that I was merely acceptable until she could attract someone better. Claire had never suggested I needed improvement or compared me unfavorably to other men, while Vanessa had made me feel inadequate and insufficient on a regular basis through her constant suggestions and obvious dissatisfaction with my appearance and lifestyle. Vanessa's response to this explanation was both desperate and telling, as she insisted that she'd been trying to help me become the best version of myself rather than expressing genuine dissatisfaction with who I was. She claimed that her suggestions about fitness, grooming, and wardrobe had been motivated by love and a desire to see me succeed socially and professionally, completely missing the point that someone who truly cared about me wouldn't see my basic existence as a project requiring constant improvement. When Claire quietly observed that healthy relationships were built on acceptance and appreciation rather than attempts to change your partner into someone else, Vanessa became defensive and slightly hostile, suggesting that Claire didn't understand the complexities of long-term relationships or the importance of growth and mutual improvement over time. The contrast between their approaches to relationships and attraction became crystal clear during this exchange, with Claire representing genuine acceptance and Vanessa embodying conditional approval based on external validation and social comparisons. 10 months after ending things with Vanessa, my life had stabilized in ways that confirmed every decision I'd made about prioritizing genuine compatibility over superficial attraction and social validation. Claire had secured a remote position with her company that allowed her to spend significant time in Detroit, with plans to relocate permanently once her lease in Milwaukee expired at the end of the year. Our relationship continued to develop naturally, built on mutual respect, shared interests, and the kind of authentic attraction that made both of us feel valued and appreciated rather than evaluated and found wanting. She'd integrated seamlessly into my social circle, getting along well with my coworkers and showing genuine interest in my hobbies and perspectives without any suggestions for improvement or comparisons to other people she found more impressive. The contrast with Vanessa's approach to relationships was stark and constant, reminding me daily that I'd made the right choice in refusing to accept being someone's consolation prize. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued struggling according to workplace gossip that occasionally reached me through mutual acquaintances who seemed to think I'd be interested in updates about her situation. She'd apparently deleted most of her social media presence after several posts seeking validation and attention had received negative responses or been completely ignored by her followers, who'd grown tired of her obvious desperation for male attention and lifestyle validation. Her appearance at work had become increasingly withdrawn and subdued, with several people commenting that she seemed to have lost the confidence and energy that had once made her popular among our industrial complex's social circles. The reports suggested someone dealing with the consequences of burned bridges and poor decisions, struggling to rebuild connections and self-worth after realizing that superficial pursuits and conditional relationships had left her isolated and unfulfilled. The final confirmation that I'd made the correct choice came when Lisa, one of Vanessa's closer friends from customer service, approached me during a lunch break to suggest that I reconsider my stance about our relationship since Vanessa was really suffering and had learned important lessons about appreciating good men. Lisa explained that Vanessa talked about me constantly, expressing regret about her superficial priorities and acknowledging that I'd been everything she should have valued in a partner, but that she'd been too influenced by social media and peer pressure to recognize what she had until it was gone. She suggested that Vanessa had grown and matured significantly over the past year, that her struggles had taught her to value substance over appearance, and that I should consider giving her another chance to prove she'd changed her approach to relationships and personal priorities. I listened politely to Lisa's appeal before explaining that while I genuinely hoped Vanessa found happiness and learned from her experiences, I'd moved on completely and found someone who truly appreciated me without needing to learn hard lessons about superficial priorities first. I told Lisa that Claire had never made me feel inadequate or insufficient, had never suggested I needed improvement to be worthy of her attention, and had never expressed any desire to be with someone else while settling for me as a backup option. The fundamental difference wasn't about Vanessa's current suffering or newfound appreciation for my qualities, but about finding someone whose initial attraction and ongoing feelings were based on genuine compatibility rather than eventual resignation to practical considerations after more exciting options had proven unavailable. Lisa seemed surprised by my firm response, apparently having expected me to show more sympathy for Vanessa's situation or curiosity about the possibility of reconciliation after hearing about her regret and personal growth. I explained that healthy relationships shouldn't require one person to suffer consequences and learn painful lessons before appreciating their partner's value, that genuine attraction and respect should be present from the beginning rather than developed as consolation after other pursuits failed. While I didn't wish Vanessa any harm and hoped she found someone who genuinely excited her, I discovered what it felt like to be chosen enthusiastically rather than reluctantly, and I had no interest in returning to a dynamic where my worth was conditional on the absence of better options. As I reflected on the entire experience months later, I realized that Vanessa's rejection had been one of the most valuable learning experiences of my adult life, teaching me to recognize the difference between someone who appreciated my qualities and someone who tolerated them while hoping for something better. Her comments about settling and wishing for someone with my stability but Marcus's attractiveness had initially felt devastating, but ultimately revealed fundamental incompatibilities that would have created ongoing problems regardless of how long we'd stayed together. Claire's genuine enthusiasm for exactly who I was, without suggestions for improvement or wistful comparisons to other men, showed me what authentic attraction actually looked like and raised my standards for future relationships in ways that benefited every aspect of my life. The experience taught me that being someone's first choice was infinitely more valuable than being their best available option, and that self-respect sometimes required walking away from people who couldn't recognize your worth until they'd lost access to it completely.